Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. And for a lot of you people that are watching on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever, if you wonder why I'm wearing a Jacksonville Jaguars hat on this show, I'll give you a really good reason. Candy Ebley and I will be covering the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans for a chance to go out there and win the AFC South Division. So with that said, that's why we're talking to little cats and a whole lot more than that. And I want to introduce my crew, and then we have a very, very serious show. So I hope y'all can stay with us for the whole time. I put a lot of work into it, and you'll understand why shortly. First of all, the crew, welcome back, Rick Curdy, Mr. Opinion.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. George Eichhorn.
Happy New Year, everyone.
JB, the program, Ellis.
Happy New Year, guys.
And last but not least, my pundit, which preceded his broadcast, a two-man act, Jacob Christner.
Happy New Year, and just a little report, Chris Jericho just gave $10,000 to Damar Hamlin for his toy drive.
So today is my first broadcast being number 60, okay? And I'll have another 10 years.
40 years.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you said earlier. I'll take 40 days, let alone no, tell that to TV. Sometimes the way my body works, you wonder a little bit now. First broadcast in the with the number 60, so I'm proud to have it. And I feel like we get a lot of wear and tear out of this body. So let me go ahead and give everybody an overview of this show. This show here, to me, is called Hughes Injustice and Hamlin Prayers. And if you wonder what that title really means, I want to talk about former Detroit Lion, the late Chuck Hughes, who died in 1971. And thankfully, Damar Hamlin, who hasn't passed away. And in both cases, they were cardiac-related situations. So, I want to prepare you guys. We're going to have a really strong show. You're not only going to hear the stories of what we believe on just these two guys, but we're going to talk about journalism or lack thereof. And I know that that's something that Jacob Christner loves to kick around anyways. And we might even give you a Google lesson before it's all said and done. Because a lot of people at other networks certainly need to utilize Google. Okay. So with that said, we'll start it off this way. First of all, I want to take the time to wish the deepest prayers to Damar Hamlin. He's 24 as he avoided becoming the second player to ever die on an NFL field during a game. I hear this kid is doing some incredible things. His toy drive has raised $6.65 million. And during the past 2 days, his incredible character is off the charts. I've seen it on a lot of different platforms. And to me, it's the one thing that's so, so important that Damar Hamlin, you are in our thoughts and prayers. And I hope, my friend, that you can go out there and recover. And we're all pulling for you. So I want to get that out there right away. And then I'm going to turn it over to the first player that died on the field. Rick, give me some of your preliminary observations about Damar Hamlin.
It's sad, we said there was only one player that happened in 1971. And I was reading about that, but it's just sad. And but football's a violent sport. I'm actually surprised that it doesn't happen much more. But I remember when Mike Utley, when he was paralyzed. I remember Dennis Byrd when he was paralyzed.
Right.
It's just a very violent sport. And he's 24 years old. And when I saw that happen, it was like, what happened? He just fainted. And all of a sudden they had to do CPR. So it's scary. And, of course, the NFL handled it all wrong as usual. Surprise, surprise. But I'm glad that the coaches stepped in and said, we're not doing this. That was a good part, that they stepped in and said, we're not doing this game, and there's no way.
Yeah, now I will say this. Candy Ebley and I were driving back from Wisconsin, and we were on the Florida Turnpike when the Monday night game took place. So I heard about it through my notification. So I didn't have a chance to see the play. But everything that I've done, and I've watched a lot of television to prepare for this show, is that it was just a simple football hit. And I know that Jacob and I talked about T. Higgins, who shouldn't be depressed over just a simple football hit. But, when anytime somebody gets hurt and you're on the other end of it, well, it's unfortunate. But yeah, Candy and I didn't see the play, and nowadays they're not going to show it again, so you only take what you hear. Although not that you can't probably pick it up on YouTube and other sources, but regular TV, I don't see it. George, I'm going to go to you last, okay, because I want to transition over. So, JB, give me your thoughts on Damar Hamlin.
So I have a lot of different things, first of all. How the NFL doesn't have a contingency plan for a situation like this is absurd. The fact that they had everyone waiting an hour when, the majority of the world said the game should have been canceled. And thank God for Zach Taylor and McDermott that, they were the leaders that they were meant to be, and they took the teams off the field. Secondly, idiots like Skip Bayless and Bart Scott need to learn to shut up. Nobody needs to hear their stupidity. Yesterday on Sideline Sports, we didn't go and talk about what happened to Hamlin. We went ahead and we brought in a cardiac surgeon that can explain to us, who saw it, what he thought possibly happened, and the best possible explanations based on science, not based on what JB Ellis thinks, because JB Ellis isn't a cardiologist or a cardiac surgeon. I'm not qualified to talk about that. I don't know the different things. So we got the explanation from a cardiac surgeon who explained it to us, and we asked our questions. We got to the bottom of it and, understood what everyone's looking for, what the timeline would be, rather than just making stuff up and going on the air and saying, well, blah, blah, blah. No, we took the time to find an expert and get to the bottom of it. And people that are criticizing T. Higgins, that's just ridiculous.
Right.
The guy is a wide receiver. He's not trying to hurt anybody, just like he's trying not to get hurt. He's a young man. He has a family. Hamlin has a family. You pray for both of them in this situation. You pray for both teams, because to sit there and watch that, and that they're expected to come out and play on Sunday, it's not going to be easy. I feel for all of them in this situation. There's no winner of this whole outcome of everything here. There's just clear losers, people that are worried about their fantasy football season. Who cares? This guy's life is on the line. People that care about, when are we going to make up the game? I mean, we can talk about that now. It's a couple of days later, but that night, there was no reason to talk about that. Shut up. Let's worry about this poor guy. They were working on it for 9 minutes. What if that was your father, your brother, your friend, your son? Would you say, "Oh, well, what am I gonna have for dinner?" No, you'd be concerned.
Right.
So it's just absurd. These people forget that athletes are human, and it's disgusting.
Jacob?
I brought this up on Pundit's Pundit. Dan Severn years ago, Arn Anderson, even farther back, they said this: what you do is you have your match, you have everything, you make sure your opponent goes home to their family. They go home safe to their family. No matter what bruises, no matter what cuts, no matter what anything, no matter what you did to them, win, lose, you bring them home to your family. That's what you do. And that's what the vast majority of the time, the people in the NFL, outside of some, twists and turns and knocks and breaks and everything, this happens. We saw that. And I didn't see the thing in live. I did not see it because I was with a friend. I was with somebody. And then I'm hearing about it, and I basically look at the NFL app, and there's everybody on the field. It looked like the Owen Hart situation in 99, excuse me. It looked like that. And I was like, and it just shook me up because this is a 24-year-old kid like that. I mean, JB and I, what are we, 18 months apart, you and I?
Yeah, about.
We're 18 months. I'm 44. I'm 44 going on 45. You're 46, right?
Yeah, 46.
Yeah. It can happen to any of us at any of the time, and we're working on something big for ourselves. But I mean, he has his whole life ahead. He has all that kind of stuff, and it shakes you up. You think about it yourself. And then I only said 2 tweets that night. One was to say your prayers, all that kind of stuff, paraphrase. Second one was to ESPN Fantasy, shut this whole thing down now. And I got some beef for it, but I didn't care because too many people on Twitter were talking about their fantasy team 15 minutes after it happened.
Right.
And the arrogance and the selfishness that it takes to say something like that. It's like, to me, to me, that fantasy should have been shut down and declare your winner right away. And I meant every bit of it. It's like a couple of them when they yacked at me, they thought it was I wouldn't have said if I was in first place or whatever. I was like, of course I would have. You've known me, JB. I wouldn't have. I don't care about that at all. It's like I play with you guys and that's it. And I play the fantasy with you guys and that's it. It's fun. We trash talk a little bit, but this is somebody's life. And it's like, I don't want to hear that thing. And we brought this up on our show with Scott and I. We brought it up on Pundit. Social media just like what Mike Tyson said, social media has made people think they're real badass. It has put it behind they're behind the keyboard and saying these things. So they have the wrong idea of what a real badass is.
Mm-hmm.
And so then because they get the wrong idea themselves. And it's like, and I just wish social media, I wish Twitter would go down. I wish all these would go down and we have to start over again, because these people need a reality check on humanity. They need a reality check on what a badass is. They need everything, because we're not showing any humanity to any of this.
All right, George. And then once you make your comment, I'll go out there and give everybody some information how they can find us. So I want to keep you rolling on this before we transition over.
Yeah, I, of course, like everybody else, is wishing him the best and a full recovery. There was some progress. A little bit of good news came out of the Cincinnati hospital without going into any detail, which they did not do, but they just said he is making some progress, which is good. Yeah, I agree. JB, you hit it right on. I mean, the NFL, as big and powerful as the NFL is, it doesn't seem like they have a contingency plan. And you're right, making people stand around and wait and, almost an hour before they make a decision is totally unacceptable. And if they got to get rid of that week off between the Super Bowl week, and push the playoffs back 1 week, so be it. I don't know what they're going to do. We don't know that. But this kid deserves the full attention. So I'm glad that the league has just taken a little bit of a longer time, but said no games this week, Monday through Friday. That game's not going to be made up, in other words, this week. But the point of contention is good, that, the league has to have a contingency plan, and I'm sure this will wake them up. As far as all the other stuff, there's so many other variables on this, as Jacob was saying, that, we all need to take a long, hard look at the way we communicate, the way we spread news, or in some cases, a lot of gossip and BS. This whole thing has to get under the radar now.
Right. Yeah, it really does. And I want to also thank Mark Mancini and Salvador Tartaglia for chiming in on the chat room. We encourage more participation so that we can go out there and put your comments on our screen via our YouTube channel.
Real quick, Scott, I wanted to say something, because I said it on Pundit also.
Yeah.
Bringing up what we brought up with chaos, George, and everything's chaos with the journalism and JB and everything. Because everything is so chaos, you realize that there is a toy drive that we talked about that's now made $6.65 million. I said that night I heard $1 million. I said I wanted 10, so it's heading that way there. Now I wanted to bring this part. This kid's making $840,000 a year, $160,000 bonus. So that's thing, but he's 2 years into his thing, and his career is probably over, to be very honest. And you don't get your pension till 4. You don't get your pension till the 4th year. We see these things right here. There are all of these little deals that we have with this, like with the collective bargaining agreement. I heard this today. The pension went down from $5,600 to $3,500 for these players. You don't get it till the 4th year. We have got, but you know something? These people talk about the fantasy team. They don't understand see, this is why I get mad at fantasy, why I get mad at Madden, and why I get mad with my Bears fans that they don't know anything about the game. They try to think that because they win their leagues. They don't know what these GMs are going to be going through in the off season.
Right.
About health, about, all the safety, the contingency plans, JB. All that stuff's going to be in that right there. And in the meantime, and one final thing I'm going to say, because of them, this kid's original thought process was $2,500. went up to $6.65 million, but he didn't even know he was going to get $2,500 for this thing, for this toy drive, and he's an NFL player. This is what happens when we get chaos and get hooked on it.
Right.
We could have heard about this a long time ago and gone to town, but he had to go. He had to collapse on the field and nearly die, and who knows what happens for us to get something good here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't play fantasy football, and the last time I did was with my family for a few years, and then I also went out there and played in a Yahoo League, but that's beside the point. I do want to point out, though, the show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune, and we're striving for 1,000 subscribers, so we would appreciate all your help to help us reach our goal of 1,000. So, again, we want to make sure these broadcasts are accessible. Then you get all the notifications of media availabilities, our partnership with Sideline Sports, as well as the remote broadcasts that we do and the streams and so forth. So I want to repeat, this show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. And once again, we're striving for 1,000 subscribers. With that said, okay, I'm going to transition over to something that only two people on this panel can really relate to, probably more. And you guys probably can relate, but there's nothing more than being there, whether you wanted to believe there or you're a part of history for all the wrong reasons. So with that said, the first player and only one to die is Chuck Hughes, the Lions wide receiver, who passed away on October 24th, 1971 at age 28. George Eichhorn and I saw the game at Tiger Stadium as 54,418 were stunned as Dick Butkus yelled to an official that Hughes was in trouble, and yet a minute and 2 seconds left in the game. The Lions were out of timeouts. They were doing their 2-minute drill, lost the game 28-23. The game was played in silence. Unlike what happened with the Buffalo game, they finished, had a minute and 2 seconds anyways. And by 3:30, the game really meant nothing. So, George, what can I say? You and I have talked about this so many times privately. And when I see this thing with Damar Hamlin, it's going to lead me to some very harsh, critical points in a few minutes. But give me your best recollection of what you saw, and I'll give everybody mine. And I want to also point out a little footnote that the night before that game, and I mentioned this on Pundit's Pundit with Jacob Christner, that Chuck Hughes and his wife got into an argument the night before. Charlie Vincent, my good friend, longtime legendary sports writer, said they got into an argument at a party over their two-year-old son chewing gum. They didn't have a chance to say they love each other again, which is sad. But the deal is this, okay, in this particular case. Mrs. Hughes went home. Chuck went to the hotel. The rest is history. Take it from there, George.
Yeah, it's certainly a very sad occasion. I think I was about 15 years old at the time. Me and my buddies went to quite a few Lions games at Tiger Stadium, old Tiger Stadium, which, as you guys know, has been demolished. The Tigers and the Lions shared that stadium for many, many years. And Chuck Hughes was just kind of, he is just kind of an ordinary guy. I mean, we're not talking about Earl McCullough, or we're not talking about a famous wide receiver. I mean, he just went about, an old country guy that, went about his business, and just nobody suspected anything wrong. There's a couple of good articles. Scott, you mentioned Charlie Vincent, Jerry Green, who's in his 90s now, who's covered every Super Bowl, wrote a nice story about it in today's Detroit News. And then a sports writer named Bill Dow, D-O-W, of the Free Press, wrote a big story about it too. It just shocked the heck out of everybody. I mean, the Lions, everybody was caught off guard. I mean, they didn't even have the equipment, of course, modern technology, what they used the other night wasn't even invented back then. So they did their best at CPR, mouth to mouth, and they also tried to revive Chuck through chest compressions too. And several of the medical staff and the training staff were on the field helping him out. And Mike, Dick Butkus standing over him. And like you said, Scott, calling, it's so vivid. He called, come on out here. He needs help. Big Ditka, Butkus. I get those two confused. Sorry. Butkus was really very upset, and as was everybody else. It was a very eerie situation. And Scott, I'll never forget the sound of that ambulance. As you said, the 54,000 were silenced, and then we could hear that ambulance pulling away from Tiger Stadium, taking him to Henry Ford Hospital. But the siren and it just added so much more uneasiness to the situation. It was a terrible situation, and Detroit did its best to try to revive him, but they just couldn't do it.
All right, so what I'm going to do, and I rarely ever do this, but I'm going to do it tonight. Rick, JB, and Jacob, I just want you to think about it, and then we'll go on to the next topic, okay? Because George and I were there. I like to get everybody involved in every topic, but just picture yourself being an 8-year-old child, okay? An 8-year-old child at Tiger Stadium having nightmares, being exposed to death for the first time in your life. Think about it. How powerful is that? Rick, you don't have to comment this time because I have other things I want to get to. But an 8-year-old child like I was with my dad, and that night when we came back, I said, Dad, does this usually happen? Said, no, it really doesn't. No, and he felt bad. I had nightmares that night, kept hearing about it on local news. And I had nightmares. I stayed with my mom and dad in their bedroom. My dad said, you can stay here with us all day long. This was a very traumatic experience, and it was just unbelievable. An 8-year-old child experiencing death for the first time in front of 54,418 people. I mean, my goodness, how powerful is that? I'm sorry, folks out here, that I'm talking about 8 years old being exposed to that stuff, let alone at an event that was subsequently we wouldn't hear about for another 51 years.
I remember when John McSherry died of a heart attack. That's probably the closest that I ever came to watching a game where you're watching the game, and all of a sudden he took his mask off, and he collapsed, and you can see Mike Lansing.
But my question, I'm sorry to interrupt, Rick. Were you ever at the venue when it occurred?
No, I wasn't.
That's my point. That's all I want to say. I understand McSherry. There's probably lots of other examples as well. In fact, for that matter, we're going to bring them up a little bit. I was at the game with Reggie Brown. George, remember when Barry got his 2000, Reggie Brown got hurt? And I was also at the Mike Utley game. Seems like bad luck follows me around a little. But when you're covering the sport and you're exposed to those kinds of things when you're there, that just shows about the physical, violent nature of the sport anyhow. But we're talking about a heart attack here, what Chuck Hughes and a young kid had to deal with it for the first time. So I just wanted to get that out there. The game meant nothing. They had to continue with 1 minute and 2 seconds left to go, and it deflated the Lions season. But I'm going to say the one thing that the NFL did do right, though, about this whole thing. I'm glad in this case with Hamlin that the game was called, suspended when it would. You don't worry about 1 minute and 2 seconds and stopping it because there's only a little bit left. But I feel like they made the right call, suspending it for the duration. What happens to the game later on, I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. I'll let them make the decision, and then we'll focus on there. But to me, that's just the most unbelievable thing that I've ever heard. And what else can you say? So now this is going to get one of the most interesting parts of this show, okay? I think I set you guys up with maybe a heavy-duty appetizer, okay? If you're in Green Bay, although I do want to mention a Green Bay Packers story, though, that was connected to this 1971. My brother ended up going to the game when the Lions walloped, I think, Green Bay. Didn't they, George, that year? Didn't they beat Green Bay that year at home?
I think so.
Yeah. So my brother Lonnie gets off easy and watches the Lions wallop Green Bay. And yours truly's got to go to the Chuck Hughes game. My God, hello. How easy. And yet, by the way, the Lions are playing the Packers this weekend. And I won't get into that around my house because we already house divided here with whatever we have. So we'll leave it at that. Now, fortunately for Hamlin, after 50-plus years, he did have a great and quick medical attention and is still fighting, thankfully, but not the case with Chuck Hughes. And as I mentioned, so, again, we're really hoping that Hamlin, but Chuck Hughes didn't have the same fate. Now, here's where it gets interesting, folks, so bear with me on this, okay? When I was preparing for this show, okay, I watched 12 and a half hours of programming on ESPN, 4 hours of Get Up, 4 hours of First Take, 4 hours of Sports Center from 12 to 2, and a half hour of PTI. And I'm going to tell you, we talk about hockey assist. Okay. Thank you very much, JB Ellis, for having me watch PTI, because not once, okay, did Get Up mention the Chuck Hughes thing, or First Take, nor did Sports Center and Cooler Heads Prevail with a half hour of PTI. And ended up what happening was on PTI, they let off with the first segment, went to a break, and then went to the other stuff. Now, I'm going to tell you I'm going to go over everyone that I feel that the important names are. What I couldn't believe is a lack of research on Hughes on these shows and throughout the league. You want to talk about one of the biggest cardinal sins in journalism is make a factual error. And ESPN, I'm calling out for the moment, okay? They're saying it's never happened before. Oh, yeah? Really? I'm thinking, I wonder if ESPN's ever heard of Google. Guess what? Okay. And if ESPN needs to go ahead and understand all they got to do is go to PTI. Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser are two of the best in the business. And I was fortunate enough to meet them on separate occasions. Wilbon, I happened to meet him out in Arizona when I was living in the Valley, and Tony Kornheiser just a couple of years ago. So with that said, here's what I came up with, and I'm going to defer to every one of you guys going on here. One of the things that angered the living daylights out of me is Herman Edwards is 68 years old. 68 years old and 55 years in football, didn't even know about it. Herman Edwards, a sub 500 coach in the NFL, known for the miracle and the Meadowlands that he returned for a touchdown. I don't care about his coaching record anyways, okay? But to me, Herman Edwards not knowing that Chuck Hughes died is absolutely baloney. Mike Greenberg, host of Get Up, 30 years, never seen it before. Do I give him a pass a little? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. New York kid, got involved, with school, but 30 years. But what do we do here when we come on the air? Don't we pre-prep a little bit? Don't we do a little bit of our research? Don't we get our notes? What Herman Edwards shouldn't be. You can tell us about all his coaching business. By the way, nice to hear from you, Jeremy B. He'll be on tomorrow's edition of Inside the Pigskin. Jim Kelly tweeted that he's never seen this either. Buffalo Bills Hall of Fame quarterback. Stephen A. Smith, 30 years, no mention of it, though he mentioned Hank Gathers and Darryl Stingley. And I got to tell you what's so funny about Stephen A. Smith, and I know that Rick Curdy will eat this one up alive. He still thinks that the Lions play in the Silverdome.
Yeah, he's an idiot.
No, that's okay. But he's still, and Stephen A., I know, who knows if you'll ever watch his show anyways. Just a correction, they play in Ford Field, and we don't care what you think during this weekend, whether the Lions and Packers will win. They made it to, they finally got a national TV game, even though it took them until the end of the year to do it. And then Bart Scott talked about Mike Utley. And then here's one, Georgia, that should catch your attention. New York Jets coach Robert Saleh. This is the first of this nature he never even knew either, and he's from Metro Detroit and Dearborn. Robert Saleh.
Yeah, unbelievable, Scott.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to be a history professor, okay, but you should know a little bit about NFL history. And the fact that Chuck Hughes was the only player ever to die inside a stadium during an NFL game is pretty darn significant. And you're right. No, they didn't do their homework.
Right. And I'll add one other thing, and then I'll mention a few, and then I'm going to turn it over to all you guys, okay? Thankfully, as I mentioned before, on PTI with Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, they talked about Hughes, and Mike Wilbon was 13 at the time, and he's from the Chicago area, so if anybody knows Dick Butkus, Mike Wilbon does, But now I'm going to mention a few other people, okay? Other mentions, there's a guy I work with up in Jacksonville by the name of Mark Blumenthal, who I'm friends with, did mention Chuck Hughes. Roy Firestone, everybody knows Roy Firestone is probably the best interviewer on the planet, talked about it. And another one of my guys that I promote with that you guys are probably all too familiar with, John Gonzalez, even talked about it as well. Now, let's do a little bit of history lesson with ESPN, okay? In 1971, ESPN were the letters of the alphabet. That's it, ESPN, letters of the alphabet. CNN as well, letters of the alphabet, okay? No social media, no Twitter, Facebook. Fox didn't have any sports. And if I want to go back to the history lesson of ESPN, Oh, how much I miss Chris Berman, Bob Lee, George Grant, Tom Meades, Gail Gardner, John Saunders, and the rest of them. They made ESPN what it is, and certainly what it isn't. And I had a chance to meet Bob Lee a couple of years ago, one of the classiest guys on the planet. And if you follow me on Facebook, I have those photos there. So I've given you guys a lot here. Rick, I know we're going to lead off with you here. All right. I talked 12 and a half hours. You can go wherever you want, Rick. 12 and a half hours. We only got it right in a half an hour with two Hall of Famers in Wilbon, Kornheiser, and I gave you the list of the names. The floor is yours, Rick.
I mean, are you surprised by ESPN with these new people? They don't care. That's just all it is. They're ignorant. They're stupid. They go on there and say idiotic comments to get the shock factor. They don't talk about facts. It's all about the shock factor. Let me say, like Skip Stupid Bayless, how insensitive he was, that some 24-year-old guy almost died on the field, and talked about playoffs and how they can mess up the play. Who cares? So, and I read up, and this happened before I was born, and I know about Chuck Hughes. I read about him, and apparently what happened was that they feel he was misdiagnosed, and that his wife actually sued the hospital and he settled, and they think he had like a ruptured aorta, and that's how he died. And so, I mean, even I know that, and it was 5 years before I was born. So for them to not know that, am I surprised? Not really, because it's just stupid, lazy journalism now, and that's what ESPN has become. I don't even watch ESPN, to be quite honest with you, because it's gone so stupid. It's like the National Enquirer. They just blab, 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 yell, scream, holler, play the race card. I'm sick of it. So I don't watch ESPN, and it's just sad that people like Chuck Hughes, and we've seen other tragedy. I was talking about John McSherry. That's the only time I ever seen when he collapsed and died of a massive heart attack. That was terrifying when I saw that on TV. So very sad what happened to Mr. Hughes and his family. And but for them not to know that, am I surprised? Not really.
JB?
People want to be celebrities and not journalists, Scott. Take that to heart. I tell you that all the time. I think that, in the space we are in, we need to be both. But a lot of people on ESPN, they don't want to be journalists. They want to be pure celebrities.
Right.
I mean, did I know about Chuck Hughes as soon as it happened?
Well,
I had no idea, but I found out pretty quickly. We spoke about it on our show for a couple of minutes. I mean, was it the greatest coverage of the Chuck Hughes situation? No, but at the same time, there was a reference made to it because it's important, and it goes back to the NFL not having a contingency plan, and the, journalism today isn't about facts and knowing what's happened in the past. It's just about getting sensation, getting clicks, and there's more to it than that. You actually have to, have history and facts in there. It's not a, and it's not an editorial. Editorials are there for opinions. When you turn on a news show, you want to hear facts.
Right.
And it's not the way it's done anymore.
I love it when you keep bringing that celebrity versus journalist. So you know what? While we're live, I'll let everybody know that there'll be a new show coming up, and we'll provide you with details called Celebrity versus Journalist. And yes, JB Ellis is a celebrity, and I'm the journalist. So stay tuned on Sideline Sports and South Florida Tribune for the premiere of that show starring JB Ellis and myself, the Motor City Mad Mouse Scott. And I definitely have no problem acting the journalist, and I'll back it up since I've been doing it for 43 years anyway. And JB, you want to wear that celebrity cap? Go ahead and do what you want. It's just going to make it a whole lot more fun that we're going to disagree and still be able to. The one thing we'll do is get people thinking about both sides, and that's what the objective of the show is. So celebrity versus journalist, Scott and JB will be launching it probably in the next few weeks or so. We're working on times and details and so forth. So we'll hope you'll be able to follow that one as well. So very good, JB. Keep bringing it up because you're just plugging the daylights out of it, and I'm okay with it. All right, Jacob. You and I are always talking about on Pundits Punted, Basketballs, or wherever we're on together about mainstream media versus what we have now. But what I want you to do, Jacob, okay, on this particular show is give me your grade of how ESPN has handled the whole thing. I gave you the particulars, the Edwards, the Greenberg, the Kelly, the Smith, the Scott, Ray Scott, Robert Saleh, and then, of course, the positive ones, and Blumenthal, Firestone, and Gonzalez. Give me your thoughts about how badly ESPN handled this, Jacob.
As far as keeping people alive, keeping the camera completely away from the, and not doing sensationalism. And as far as not trying to be too sensationalist during the moment, that's an A. But I'm going to explain something here. We're living in a world right now. You talked about history. All of you talked about history. That it's not about history. It's not about facts, not anything. It's just sensationalism. We're living in a world right now that this is why social media absolutely sucks, is because you get a set of people trying to get rid of history because it's not comfortable to them. They don't want Babe Ruth as an all-timer because he didn't play against black people, whatever. That was the time. So they are trying their hardest to make Shohei Ohtani better than Babe Ruth, even though he hits 100 points less than Babe Ruth on his prime. They do this. So to say that they didn't know about Chuck Hughes, this isn't a shock, because I'm already shocked that Dan Orlovsky prayed on the air because a lot of them trying to get rid of God, to be able to do that, and he had the guts to do that part. How many people? It wasn't Tebow, it was Orlovsky that did it. But these are the things these are the deals. When they try to get rid of history, of course they're not going to know about Chuck Hughes because they probably didn't want him to exist. The world doesn't exist before our world. It's ego, it's arrogance. It is Snapchat, it is TikTok. It is all those. That is what's ruining journalism. It's because everything is the now standpoint. Far away was 2018. Those other ones, those were evil. Those were everything. No, they weren't evil. They were family people. The evil ones did evil things just like they do now. But that was the time was what it was. I'm glad that it's over and we can all be more, what they say, inclusive. Yes, because we have a lot more interesting humans in this world. But the time was the time. Right. We've got to admit our history. And the point of what ESPN does, Fox does, Fox Sports does, any of them that say they didn't know, and a 68-year-old man like Herm Edwards didn't know.
Right.
All of those. That's just the idea of, if he doesn't know, that's ESPN telling him not to. Because you'd have an idea. It's like everything is sensationalism. No. It's like, get rid of history. We don't want to know it. The people that watch, we don't want them to know it. It's like everybody's too butthurt to admit. We got to give them what's uncomfortable so they understand and we get better from it.
Well said. And I want to point out some about Herman Edwards. I'm still befuddled or baffled. I don't know what the proper adjective is, that a guy 68 years old did not even go out there and know about the Hughes, or maybe he's not letting it on. But remember, we're talking about a network, though, that brought on Rush Limbaugh to go out there and be part of its Sunday telecast, pregame, and he didn't even make it through the year because he was way ahead of what he had done. So, you could throw that Hail Mary thinking you could connect on a home run there, but sometimes it bites you in the butt. But to me, just the ignorance and lack of responsibility of research, George Eichhorn, is a cardinal sin, because you and I were brought up with the AP style book, weren't we? That's how we existed in our journalism classes.
Yes, and we sure did.
That's a Bible of journalism. Everybody, let me give you a little journalism overview here, going back to the day when George and I were heavily involved. Marshall McLuhan came up with the saying that the medium is the message. He'd be turning over his grave if he knew what the medium turned out to be the message now, because it's just unbelievable. And I'm going to backtrack on what Jacob Christner had to say too. Social media is something we don't have to like. And unfortunately, if we're going to promote what we have to do it. But it doesn't mean that I have to really like it. One of my best friends, Tony DeMarco, who George and I, he got out of this business because he got sick and tired of it too, took his retirement. And I'm just talking about a lot of different people that get fed up after a while. I also want to thank Will Vogel and Smoking Jeremy B for their continuous comments in the chat room. George, you can read them every now and then if you want to, while I keep this program on track. But, again, when you go out there and don't Google, there are going to be a lot of people that are smart enough to know that you're not doing your job. Now, do I watch ESPN? I'll tell you why I do, because I'm a student of this business. I enjoy watching Smith's debate skills a little bit because he does come prepared. He's a little loud for my taste, but he is a strong debater and he does research. I'll give him that much. I mean, I'm going to idolize this guy. Bob Lee I idolize him. I don't idolize Smith. But if I can come up with content for our shows and make them better and improve my delivery on the air for you guys, as well as my co-hosts and my listeners, I'm always a student of wanting to get better. And I'm not talking about just Smith in general. Any journalist out there, I'm always willing to learn from. You know the drill, George. How many times have you shadowed other individuals in an effort to try to go out there and improve what you do? George,
Sure.
Take it away. Give me your, first of all, grade or lack thereof, possibly, of how ESPN handled this whole thing.
No, I would have to give them a failing grade, Scott. You guys are right on, spot on. It's like they're afraid to do the research, or like you said, Jacob, they don't want to. It's not convenient for them anymore to go back in history and that sort of stuff. That's total BS. Chuck Hughes, it's not a household name, but for crying out loud, that's a fact that stood out in history and in football history for such a long, long time, even if you couldn't remember the name, okay? Like I said earlier, there's guys in Detroit, and me and Scott included, any one of them could have picked up a phone or contacted a Detroit contact or something and says, what is this about this Chuck Hughes guy? Can you share with me what happened? No, they didn't do it because they don't want to. They want to have the easy route and just give their opinions and stuff like that. So you're right. I mean, it's uncomfortable for them. And Smoke and Jeremy B, I think you hit it too. You said, because history is becoming irrelevant to the Google society, they are discarding all of the uncomfortable past. And it's unfortunate, and it's happening in sports just as it is in American history and politics as well. So there's this uncomfortable level. They don't want to dig for the facts, and they don't want to bring up things that happened in the past because they think, oh, what? No, nobody cares about that. Well, that's total BS in a situation like this, because you do need to know. Your audience does need to know, when did this happen? What happened when it happened before, as in the case of 1971 with Chuck Hughes.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that really annoyed the daylights on me, and Jacob, give me one fast second, okay? The fact of the matter is that when you make a factual error in journalism, that to me is criminal mentally for us to say it's never happened before. Really? It never happened before? To me, that's a bunch of baloney, okay? In your eyes, maybe you weren't old enough to know it didn't happen before, but what gives you the audacity to say it never happened before? I don't think it. That's, to me, just totally blatant irresponsibility. Go ahead, Jacob. I had to get that out there. It's never happened before.
Understood. George, Scott, let me ask you this. Have you ever seen the movie The Face in the Crowd?
I can't say I have, no.
Have you? It is
No.
with Andy Griffith. Go look for it. It is about a guy named Lonesome Rhodes, who basically becomes the Trump of his day. I'm saying this part, and I'm not kidding you. Watch it.
Okay.
It's like 57 or something. And I'm going to bring this. When people erase history because they're uncomfortable, except for the stuff they want to say, and I'm saying some people are going to like Trump. Good. Okay. Some people are going to hate him. Good. Okay. He is what he is. But when you erase history, you erase a face in the crowd, you erase Lonesome Rhodes, and then you get Trump. Oh, he's never happened before. It happened about 50,000 times in different ways. Every televangelist we've ever known, every televangelist we've ever known that's ever taken money from a poor lady with her last buck. It has ever happened. And then they're so shocked when he wins. That's why. And it's not a hate or a like on Trump. It is just that's what happens when you get rid of history. That's what happens when you do. And then it's what happens in your little football when you say, "Oh my God, we never did this before." My Bears are talking. These idiot Bears fans are talking about how we had this big booming offensive power before, even though we lost 3 out of 4. We've never seen this offensive power before, except 2020 when Trubisky did it.
Right.
Except when he did. But forget about him. We don't want to hear about him. They do that, then they wonder why. Something always happens.
Right.
This is their fault. This is social media's fault. This is the current era journalist's fault.
All right.
And I'm just saying that.
Real
All right,
quick,
so
though, I
Jacob-
mean,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go
So
ahead,
Jacob,
Jacob.
real quick, we're bashing ESPN for the aftermath. But one thing I do want to give them a lot of credit for, the way they handled it on the night of the broadcast, I thought was superb. It was a no-win situation for everybody at the time. Obviously, the majority of the world that was watching the game was more concerned with this young man's health, Damar Hamlin's, and you could see the three people in the studio, Troy and Joe, they really went, and I thought they did a superb job in a very tough situation. There's not much you could do as a broadcaster there. You saw that they were legitimately broken up, and you saw that they were human. And I thought that they did a great job, just making us understand the severity of it with what little news that they had.
well, I mean, here I'll say this right now. I'm talking about ESPN's lack of responsibility for omitting an individual in Metro Detroit who died, and we're saying it's never happened before. And I've gone out and watched sports centers as well. Hey, listen, I will continue to watch ESPN. I will, because it's part of what I do. And I'm a sponge when it comes to. I have supported that station since 1979 when it actually during its inauguration initially. And now what are we, 2023? I'll continue to watch it. I think they made a mistake letting a lot of the old timers go that you were able to relate, but who they want to pay and who they employ had nothing to do with me at all. I don't care. I mean, I'll watch what you put in front of me. And if I don't like it, I won't. I mean, what am I going to tell you right now that Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser may have saved ESPN in the aftermath because guys like Stephen A. Smith, Herman Edwards want to know about Hughes? Well, at least you can tell you right now. And I'm going to tell you, JB, I don't know if you got the same effect from their body language, but don't you think, as I watched it once, that Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser were a little angry inside that nobody else on their network mentioned it, that they were the first ones that actually brought it up, but they hit it well? That's the impression I got. Okay. They're embarrassed at their network that they were the only ones that brought up Hughes. So, yeah, listen, Troy Aikman, to me, is a fine broadcaster. He's done a good job. Joe Buck, I met him, super nice guy. I actually met his dad many years ago in Pompano Beach, Jack. I have nothing against him personally, I don't. And they have a lot of fine announcers at all. And again, and Lisa Salter is very touching as well. Booger McFarland. Again, they're dealing with something for the first time that they never foresaw happening. And maybe it's unfair for me to judge them a little. Well, maybe not, because George and I, lived it. There's nothing more powerful in life than living it.
Oh, no, I don't disagree with you, Scott. I mean, the crew that was on the game, I can understand if they didn't know. Because, honestly, off the top of my head, I probably wouldn't have known of Chuck Hughes. I'm 99% sure I've heard of it growing up, being a fan of football. But
right.
Do I remember it? Because, it wasn't the Giants. It wasn't a team I followed. It wasn't something that, I would think of all the time. So I can understand, the crew not at that immediate point knowing.
Right.
But someone who's producing, get the research done, have some information. It's not the faces that you see. It's the people behind the scenes that, when you work for an organization like that, 99% of the stuff is fed to you. A lot of people don't realize, if you're on the NFL, if you're credentialed by the NFL, they send you out press releases every week, a couple of times a week. That's where a lot of these guys get their stories and stats from. It's not, nobody does research anymore. It's all force fed to you. So somebody that's producing that telecast has got to go back and get that information for them. But what I do give them credit for is their natural reaction, them not, doing anything saying something that was stupid, because in that situation, it's not easy. You're on the spot. It's something you've probably never dealt with. It's the worst case scenario. And you're trying to keep people watching because that's your job. but you also at the same point don't want to seem like you don't care, and I'm sure they do. So it's just a tough line to walk. And I thought they really did an excellent job in that respect.
Well, nobody's taking away the human element. Hey, Jacob, let me ask you a question. You ever see the movie Broadcast News?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and let me ask you this. Okay, you're in this business like I am. Did one of the anchors look like he faked it through one of those things here where it was moving all of a sudden, and he had to, because he looked good. He was one of those dapper Dans, on TV that, I read through the whole thing. Let me tell you, another lifetime ago, I used to go ahead and do behind the scenes work for local stations here in Southern Florida, Channel 7 here, which at that time was NBC, and I've gone to other ones. And I'll tell you what, I used to dig up and do the research for these people. Now, in my opinion, and they appreciated the hard work that I put into it, because I'll make sure that I'm competitive now as I was many years ago. I'm making sure we get the best stuff, the most stuff on as fast as we can. And one of my mentors years ago named Andy Lascano, famously out in Milwaukee, always told me, Scotty, the key to lasting in this business is be different. But Jacob, didn't you notice in that one scene where you had the one guy who was the good-looking guy, not the one with the bushy hair that, is good behind the scenes. Nobody would give him a chance to anchor, but then he sweat and forget that, watch a movie. But the one guy where I said it moved me, but then the smart woman there read into it and saw some things that, this wasn't real until she looked deeper into it. So, and that's what I noticed watching it. I've watched that movie a lot of times. So JB, anytime you have an instantaneous reaction where people don't know what's what, but when everybody's telling me it's never happened before on the aftermath, I got a problem with that. I really do have a problem with that. And more importantly, the initial reaction, the shock that this new media have where everybody's under 50, doesn't know what happened. So what? I mean, you have YouTube, you have all kinds of resources to look this stuff up. You got more. Yeah, of course, we all know about press releases, right, JB? I mean, George Eichhorn and I live in a press box. Of course, nowadays they do everything online, so we have to go to the computer to do it. But I can say I have a paper trail of press releases that could definitely
what happened?
There's so much available out there.
Yeah.
But listen, guys. All they had at Google was, did anyone die in an NFL game?
Right.
On the field. That's all they had to do. Somebody had researched it.
I Googled it. I saw the story, read it, and so it's easy. 5-minute read.
Well, I knew it. Here's the thing. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying this. I knew it because here's one of the things. One of our people from Sideline Sports, Dom DeRubis, he had said he and I are around the same age, yet I have I have quite a bit more knowledge on certain things like this. It's because I was 6 years old absorbing sports, and I had every book, trivia book, that kind of thing. I read the newspapers even then. I did all that kind of stuff like that. I got history, and plus we didn't have cable TV. So I did not absorb politics, but I knew who Oliver North was when I was 9 years old. You get the things like that when you do that and you don't have cable. You kind of absorb things you see at 6:30 in the morning, the names that you would get. You get the books, you get all that stuff. That's why I have more knowledge of this kind of stuff to get to this type of thing. But to bring up broadcast news, well, here's another movie I'm going to give you, Die Hard. One of the whole segments that they kept going back and forth on was the idiot sideline guy and the thing. He wanted to look at his hair, how good it looked, and he wasn't getting any real answers. He wasn't getting any real thing. You got to remember, he was the news guy that was going to make it sensationalist.
Right.
And then the wife beat the crap out of him at the end, knocked him out. But that's the whole thing about it. He always wanted to look good. That's every movie from the 80s and 90s ever. They all have to look sensationalist. Everything. They're not doing their real work. They're trying to look good.
And I'm with you on that too, Jacob. And I know Scott is too. We took our sports seriously. We couldn't wait till the next sports magazine came out, Sports Illustrated, and we learned and absorbed all of that sports history.
Well, the reality of the whole situation is there's been so much more journalism going on.
The what? What'd you say?
A lot of irresponsible journalism going on.
Well, it is irresponsible. Just bringing that. There is irresponsible because, like I said, I brought up a name from the past that wasn't even sports. And I'm not saying I knew politics, and I didn't know anything about politics at all till 28 years old. So don't take what I was going to say. I'm not going to be Mr. President of the United States. What I was saying was I knew the sports. It's all I knew from that point. But what I was saying is when you didn't have cable TV, you have names that come around to you. I had every little book. I was reading it for you. I was reading it 3 and spelling it 4. There's those little things. That's why the knowledge that I've got. It's because I was reading then I loved sports. So I did know about Chuck Hughes because it was in books.
Well, there you go. All right, whatever you know. Sports James can be heard on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube. South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. So Jacob, are you giving me the top of real business or Instagram, where we can see you?
Oh, absolutely. Sunday nights, Basket Bros, and we're working on a special guest. I can't say yet, but we're working on it. We're gonna see, but it's gonna either be this week or some subsequent weeks down the line. We're working on it, so I'll let you know. Monday nights is going to be the pundit views. That's what we're working on, and we're getting on that guest. Tuesday nights during the season is going to be confidential. Wednesday nights, doubleheader, Pundits Pundit, and Pundits Pundit and Sports Exchange with all of you. And Scott's on my Pundits Pundit also. Thursdays, Yin and Yang. Yin and Yang, it's outside of sports. It is films. It's television. It is politics and psychology. All kinds of different things, anything but sports. Every once in a while, and also on the sideline, every once in a while when they need me and they give me a call, the gauntlet. And then back to the thing again, so I stay busy.
All right, JB, give it to him.
JB underscore the program on Twitter. Sideline Sports every Tuesday at 8:30. Here every Wednesday, J&J Sports Express at 7 p.m. And every other week, both sides of the coin. Who else? Who knows where else?
All right, Rick.
You can find me on my website, www.charlottebats.com. I'm on Facebook at Charlotte MLB, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball, and Instagram, Charlotte Bats. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curdy. And my email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
All right, George.
Yes, I'm the author of Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And let me say this, Scott and I know Van Patrick was the announcer for that game on radio with Bob Reynolds when Chuck Hughes died. It's just a nice book. It tells you about the history of sports broadcasting in Detroit and Michigan. And Scott, you're in it too, as you're featured with a couple of greats, all-time greats, Jimmy Connors and Muhammad Ali. There's a link to the book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, at the South Florida Tribune website under the Motor City Tribune. And I'm also part of the Monday night show, Fire Up Michigan, along with Jeremy and Scott. And you can find me at gicorn@yahoo.com or at SNG Sports 99.
Right, and George Icorn and I, just a programming note, we'll be doing another separate sports exchange on our own. We'll be bringing on other guests to complement this sports exchange as well. So stay tuned for those announcements as well. Let me give you the information about us so that everybody who's just joining us can find out about it right now. I want to thank everybody for being a part of this show, including those individuals in the chat room who were very, very outstanding, and their opinions were very, very appreciated. Just so you know that the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers, and we could appreciate all your help. Please share it with your friends, your family, and whatnot, and it would be very much appreciated. I can tell you right now, guys, everybody, Jacob, George, Rick, JB, it's not easy coming down hard on another network. I don't like to do it. It's very uncharacteristic of me doing it. But when you reach a point where journalism is compromised a lot, as I believe it has been this week. I mean, I think about my time, I don't know about your time, but I invested 12 and a half hours to watch or something, and I only got it in a 30-minute time frame. I won't say it was a waste of my time because it was knowledgeable and helpful, but I really do struggle with today's journalism is what I do. I mean, geez, there's so much available to you. My gosh, Google out there. And I've never been to ESPN's headquarters in Bristol, Connecticut. I would certainly love to visit one time, take a tour of the place. I hear it's a big place. Once again, they were working in trailers back in '79 until everybody got going. But with all that technology and being selective about what they do know or not, it's not. I don't like Chris, but I'm not afraid to speak out when the situation presents itself. And for Chuck Hughes to be is an injustice, and of course it gives us opportunity for prayers to Damar Hamlin. So, the way I look at it, you got to do what you got to do. And I hope that we all accomplished our objectives tonight to let people know that you have so many different people out here that young and old, depending on the ages, still didn't know something that was a pertinent fact for something. And I know I've said it time and time again, to say a big network that it's never happened before, no way. Or as Gomer Pyle would say, shame, shame, shame. Yes, a little humor comes out of this thing a little bit as well. So, but with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, Hughes and Justice, Hamlin Prayers. Once again, our continued prayers to Damar Hamlin. And we hope that you go out there and get better and have a speedy recovery. And we'll certainly keep you in our hearts and our thoughts. But great job by each and every one of you guys. And we look forward to doing this again next Wednesday night. New topics. And there will be topics. Tonight we were forced to go into one and spend more time on it. And justifiably so. That's where we were going with it. So on behalf of George Eichhorn, Rick Curdy, Jacob Christner, and JB Ellis, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. One other thing I forgot to mention, you can find me at Tribune South. And if you want to comment, contact us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And a special kudos to Candy Ebling, who does a wonderful job getting all these shows up there as well. So any comments out there, feel free to email, and then we'll post them on the next broadcast. So meanwhile, good night, everybody, and have yourself a great weekend, and we'll catch you next week. Bye now.
Good night.
Nice.
Good night.